Matthew 25, 31 to 46 will be our text this morning. Matthew 25, 31 to 46. It's good to be home. Had a great trip, but there's no place like home. And it's good to sleep. And I was texting my best friend yesterday morning. He said, it's nice to slept in my own bed last night. And I said, Alex, there's no bed like your own. And as much as we enjoy traveling and being with family, there's no bed like your own. And you know that. And it's good to be back and to be with you this morning. Dave, it is good to see you. You spent 3 nights, you said, in the hospital, so you beat me. I just spent 1. But, the ER doc said I had the biggest hematoma he'd ever seen. So I win there. So I think he's got out of medical school right before he walked through the door. I mean, he might have been 28, 27 at most. He left the room and said, what was he, 12? And I don't know. You know how it is. You know how it is when you go to those places. It's good to be here and be with you. And kind of been laughing at the weather, Sonoma. They're calling this a freeze. And according to what I have seen, Deer Park's not going to get below 32. Now, it may. It's going to be there at the edge a time or two. But I know our folks in Kentucky and our family in Kentucky is having a time of it this morning, along with much of the nation. I had a time of it myself a few years ago. I've been preaching, and the elders decided that 10 years was enough, and I had done several interviews and couldn't find anything. And so Heritage Christian University said, Justin, just come and work with us for a while. And so the family and I did, but they were in a budget crunch, and HCU really was just paying us enough to survive. Well, here comes Christmas. Tammy and I had 2 young boys, and we were concerned, and we were talking, how are we going to make it through Christmas? Well, unbeknownst to me, Dr. Bill Bagent, the academic dean at the university, also one of the elders at the Mars Hill Church where we worshiped, stopped by my office one morning and handed me $200 for the boys' Christmas. There were some members there at the Mars Hill Church who knew we were struggling and don't know who they are or were, didn't want us to know, but wanted the boys to have a nice Christmas. A nice Christmas they had. Now, how many times have you been helped by someone when you were in a tight spot? Maybe you've been in the hospital and someone's come to visit when you were hurting, when you were sick. Maybe someone brought you food when you didn't know how you were going to eat. Or on the other hand, how many times have you gone to the hospital or the nursing home to visit somebody? Gone to somebody's home who has just lost a loved one? Gone by the funeral home to show your love, your care, and your compassion? How many times have you given money or food or clothing to somebody who was struggling? In this morning's text, Jesus made abundantly clear that caring for outcasts, the downtrodden, the needy, the destitute, whatever label you might want to put, is a matter of heaven and hell. It is a matter of heaven and hell. In fact, the Lord taught us that serving the hurting is the hallmark of Christianity. Serving the hurting is the hallmark of Christianity. That's exactly what the Lord said. Matthew 25, starting at verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in His glory, the Son of Man as a title for the Messiah comes from Daniel 7, where one as a Son of Man comes and receives His kingdom and glory and honor. It was Jesus' favorite self-designation of Himself. And in Jesus' day, it was a messianic title. And so when He said Son of Man, people instantly heard Messiah in that title. When the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, then He will sit on His glorious throne. His glorious throne. Two things come to mind when you think about that throne. One is Jesus is divine. In the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, God is the judge. Here Jesus is judge. The only way for Jesus to be the judge is for Jesus to be divine, to be God. And of course, He is. The other thing that glorious throne illustrates is Jesus' authority. Of course, He has that authority because He is God, because He is divine. But sitting on that throne recognizes that authority, emblematic of that authority. Before Him, verse 32, will be gathered all the nations. There ain't gonna be nobody escape that day. Nobody. No matter how far flung off the side of the earth you may be, or how far you may think you might be, you're gonna be there. All nations, everybody will be there. Remember in the Revelation, John the Revelator saw the small and great, everybody, all the dead, standing before the throne. All nations, you and everybody else will be there. And He will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Sheep and goats grazed together in antiquity, in Jesus' day. But at night, the shepherd had to divide them. You see, goats needed to be kept warm. Oh, it's a good thing, too, because they're going to be kept warm for a long time in this text. But they like to be kept warm, and the sheep like the open air. And so at the end of the day, the shepherd would divide them one from another. And at the end of the age, the King will separate them forever. He will place the sheep on His right. That was a preferred place in antiquity. If you went to a banquet, you wanted to be at the host's right hand. That was the best place. But the goats on the left. Not only was the left the lesser place, but goats were less valuable than sheep. Thus, Jesus' hearers would instantly have recognized what's going on here. The sheep, those more valuable animals, on the right, the better place. The goats, the less valuable, to that less valuable place. Then the King will say to those on His right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Inheriting the kingdom was an important ideal in Judaism. Jews were God's people, God's kingdom. And thus, they often spoke of inheriting the kingdom. But here, Jesus applies the term to the new Israel, the spiritual Israel, his people washed in his blood, who inherit that kingdom prepared for them from the foundation of the world. For, verse 36, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. There is identification with Jesus, by Jesus, with those who are down and out, the outcast, the destitute, the marginalized. Jesus identifies with them. And he said that as his people cared for those marginalized, destitute, outcast folks, they had cared for him. Serving the hurting is the hallmark of Christianity. But Jesus went on. Then he will say to those on the left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Notice that text carefully. Enter into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, not prepared for you. God never intended people to go to hell. Do you realize that? God never intended for a single soul to go to hell. He did not create hell with you in mind at all. He created hell with the devil and his angels in mind. That's why it's there. Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And notice, it is an eternal fire, not a temporary one. No purgatory where you can get out of it, but an eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For, verse 42, I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, truly, I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. They looked out for self, didn't care about the hurting, the outcast, the marginalized, downtrodden, all self. And Jesus said, as much as you did not do it to one of the least of these, the least of these. You did not do it to me. And these, he said at verse 46, will go away into eternal punishment, not annihilation, not eternal sleep, not eternal unconsciousness, but eternal punishment. But the righteous, those on the right, to eternal life. The Lord taught unmistakably that serving the hurting is the hallmark trait of a Christian. Now stop for just a moment and think with me. Where did Jesus say in this text to those on the right, you got your doctrine right, therefore enter into the joy of your Lord? Where did he say you were moral? You did not participate in the works of the flesh. You walked by the Spirit. Thereby enter into the joy of your Lord. Where did he say you obeyed me? Therefore enter into the joy of your Lord. Think about it. Here is a judgment scene. Jesus never mentioned doctrine. He never mentioned morality. He never mentioned obedience. And each of you, knows how important doctrine is. You can't just have any old doctrine. It's got to be God's word. You've got to obey God. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. He who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. You can't live by the flesh and expect to enter the kingdom of heaven. You know that. You know how important morality and doctrine obedience are. They're vitally important. And since they are vitally important, you can't go to heaven without them. Okay, let's just be honest about it. Let's call it what it is. But since they are so important, the fact that here at this judgment scene, Jesus doesn't mention them, but it mentions how his people treat the outcast, highlights this truth, in my view, that serving the hurting is the hallmark of Christianity. And since that is the truth, there are two things you need to do. First, you need to decide. You got to pick your side. You got to decide. You want to be with the sheep or the goats? That is your choice. You get to make it, and you need to make it. Matthew 25, 31 and 32. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate them from one another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. You are going to be separated. You'll be in one of two divisions. And you need to think long and hard, which division do you really want to be in? Do you want to be in that division that leads to life? Or do you, for some odd reason, want to be in that division that leads to hell. Oh, we all say, well, I want to be in that one that goes to life. Good, good. But you see, it doesn't stop there. It's not just saying, hey, I want to go to heaven. No. But you need to stop, first of all, and decide, what do you want? God has always given man a choice. In the garden, before Adam and Eve, he put two trees. They could eat of the tree of life and live forever. Or they could eat of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil and violate the will of God. It was their choice. They were not robots. They didn't have to obey God. God didn't twist arms. He gave them the choice. It was theirs to make. As he said his farewell to the people, Joshua said, Joshua 24:15, if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the God your father served in the region beyond the river, or the God of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. If you don't want to serve the Lord, don't want to be Yahweh's people, Joshua said, fine. You can pick the gods, the Amorites, or the gods in whose land you now dwell, or the gods your ancestors worship. Just pick your God. God gave you the choice. Before his confrontation, his competition with the prophets of Baal, Elijah said, 1 Kings 18:21, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. You wish-washy people, which is going to be, he said. You're going to follow Yahweh, you're going to follow Baal. But see, the choice was theirs to make. The choice is yours to make. And what choice is that going to be? You need to decide. Right here, right now. You need to decide. Like we said, it doesn't do much good just to decide. You also need to deliver. You need, in other words, to care for the downtrodden, the outcast, the marginalized. Jesus said, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. God expects his people to serve the hurting. God expects his people to serve the hurting. Not just the ones that you and I might think are worthy of our help or our assistance. You know, I don't read anything in the text that Jesus said, okay, now wait a minute. I was hungry and it wasn't my fault. Or I was naked because I was robbed. Or, no, not I was a stranger and you asked me a whole bunch of questions about where I was from and other things to make sure it was okay. Or I was naked and you took inventory of why I was naked and then you clothed me. God expects his people to be servants of those who are outcasts and marginalized. Jesus said exactly who your neighbor is. It's that one on the way to Jericho that has been beaten, and you dare not pass by on the other side. Or Galatians 6:10. As we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone. To everyone. Yes, Paul continued, especially those in the household of faith. I recognize that. But he said, first of all, as we have opportunity, let us do good to every. 1 Thessalonians 5:14. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. How are you going to deliver? Let's put it another way. Go to the text with me. You know people who are hungry. How are you going to feed them? You know people who are thirsty. How will you give them drink? You're going to encounter strangers. How will you welcome them? You're going to see the naked. How will you clothe them? You're going to encounter the sick. When will you visit them? You know there are folks in prison. How will you serve them? There's where it comes down to. Have you ever sat down with this list? The hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, those in prison, and thought about how you can serve those folks? You need to. You don't need just to sit down with the text and say, how can I serve them? But then you need to get up and deliver. It's not good enough to talk a talk or make that decision. Jesus isn't going to say to those on the right, well, you had good intentions. You wanted to help. Boy, you sure did sit down with that text and you went through there and you made a list of all the ways you were going to serve. Oh, good for you. No, that's not what he says, is it? I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. Stranger, you welcomed me. Sick, prison, you visited me. Naked, you clothed me. How will you deliver? The truth is, God has delivered you with all of your sin, with all of your wrongdoing, with all of your error. God has delivered you. Colossians 1:13 and 14. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness, delivered us from the domain of darkness, and transferred us the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sin. The question you need to answer this morning is, are you living in that kingdom to which God has delivered you through His Son. Each one here has been delivered. But are you living now in that kingdom? Do you need to come this morning and be delivered anew and claim that kingdom anew? Right now, as we stand and sing.